So what is a day in the life of producing hops? Like, what time do you start in the morning? Are you a crack of dawn type of thing going on, and you're not done till the sun goes down, or like what's that process?
Well, one of the fun parts of growing hops is every day is different, and so there's significant steps in the production system throughout the year. And hops are only harvested one time a year. So around this time of year, this year we were actually a little bit earlier, but typically in the month of August and maybe early September, the hops are harvested. And depending on the maturity of the plant and the variety, they'll mature at different times. And then, of course, on a year like this, where we have these kind of incredible weather patterns we've never seen before, it also changes the maturation timeline of when they come in. But to start a hop yard, first thing you do is you plant either a rhizome. The rhizome is the piece of root that comes off an existing plant, and you plant that in the ground sometime in February, March, and then you prepare the bed, and then you drop the rhizome in, and then give it ample water, and then pretty soon the hop plant pops out of the ground.
Wow.
You can also use transplants, and so this year, some of the varieties that we wanted to get a head start on, we used transplants. So the cashmere and the cluster came from a small transplant that you put in the ground. You typically plant hops about every 40 inches. You put a mound of hops every 40 inches rather, and then sometime in April, there'll be enough of a vine that it's ready to start climbing. So prior to that, you'll have built a trellis system.
Like we see in the back, right?
And our trellis system here is 16 feet tall.
Wow.
Has a steel cable that runs across the top. And then for each plant, you hang this coconut coir, which is a really fibrous, it's coconut husk, but it's a really fibrous string that makes for the perfect string for the hop to plant. So you go along at 16 feet and tie the coir up at the top, and then you put a small clip and clip it into the ground. And then 2 or 3 times through the season, you go through and wind the binds, help them get started, and then they make their way up to the top. Throughout the season, it's typical weeding and keeping the weeds down. Once the hops kind of surpass the weeds, you're out of the clear. But up until then, it's pretty tortuous work to keep out there and keep after the weeds.
And for the weeds, are you just digging them up from the root, or like are you using is there any natural thing that you can use to stop them from growing or much, or because of that nutrient soil that the hops are helping to produce, the weeds are like, yes, freedom, I'm gonna eat up everything?
The first year we were out every weekend pulling weeds and bend over and
hands and knees and
cursing those weeds, and it gets better each year, but you just can't give up. One of the techniques we use is we put rice straw. We learned this from a fellow grower up in Northern California, to use rice straw, and by covering the bed with rice straw, you produce a natural weed deterrent, so the weeds can't get through. And then hops also love silica, so the silica from the rice straw helps kind of replenish the soil and regenerate the soil.
Speaking of replenishing the soil, have you grown anything outside of the hops in the soil so that you could? I know a lot of farmers they used to plant a lot of different things just to keep, to your point, making the soil enriched, because without enriched soil, you just pretty much have dead, no food for the plant. So are you growing anything in between harvest, or is it just we're just doing different types of hops and we're making sure that we just keep it as the soil as enriched as possible?
Prior to the hop yard, it was just a 2-acre field of weeds for 20 years. And so now that we have the hops in, what we're doing is starting to experiment with what other cover crops can we put in that'll do 2 things. One is control the weeds, but also fix some nitrogen for us. We even had the idea to try to grow some barley in between the rows and see if we can produce 2 ingredients at the same time. But that's coming this year. We're continuing to experiment with what we can grow in between the rows, and also what will help replenish the soil, but also provide us weed control. So,
now, have you done any home brewing yourself at all?
We have.
What time do we have to do that?
Yes. Our friends love to come visit who are home brewers, and so we'll go pick some hops, but our requirement is that they got to come up with a recipe and make the brew, and then we'll help with the bottling afterwards.
Do they ever ask you for recipes and stuff? Do they assume that you're you've done some home brewing because you grow hops? Okay.
Everyone asks that. Okay. If we're brewing on top of growing hops, and I think I don't know if we have that time.
Gotcha.
Not
We
that
like-
energy.
We
yet.
like to focus our time on the thing that we think we can do really well, which is grow really good hops that are local and that are unique to the opportunity for brewers to use.
Got it.